Stand by for speed.
Okay.
We have speed.
Sheikh, thanks for making yourself available to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
I'm very happy to be here, Mahdi, and I hope that my visit to the US has a very good result.
Now, why are you in the US this week?
My visit to US is the main target for my visit is to open the main office for the Fahd Salem Center for Dialogue and support of freedom in the, as a globally, and the Middle East and Kuwait as a locally. And for me to open this center in the US means that include sitting with people and with community that support the main issue that the center supports.
Mm-hmm. So that's a very big and important goal. No one is against peace. What are can you help me understand how the Fahd Center will specifically promote these kinds of goals?
First of thing, Mahdi, that the center comes from the heart of the Middle East, the heart of the GCC countries in the Gulf, in Kuwait. Kuwait is a pioneer of democracy. It has its own constitution, and this constitution is correct and the right way of democracy in the region. And as member of the ruling family who support this center and wanted the center to have a very good role in promoting more freedom for people and to support the dialogue and denounce the violence that it's happening all around us in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Now, President Obama is speaking, and what are you hoping to hear from him in terms of a role for the United States in the reform or the revolutionary movements that are trying to take place in several countries?
Everyone's waiting for his speech, for President Obama's speech, and everyone hopes, and I am one of these people, that to see President Obama supports more democracy in the region, especially in the Middle East. And when I say support, I mean support in a non-violent procedures to push and talk with the people who has the capability of doing the change in the region to faster the change and faster the democracy process in the region. So we will have more countries going in a peaceful matter, not what happened in Libya and other countries that went through blood and violence. And this is contradict what in the center we are asking for. We are asking for a process, peaceful process, no violent, and what we see on the ground is very much violent, and the peaceful method and the needs for the people are step to the second place.
Well, the problem is, of course, we're talking about a region where democracy, as the West defines it, is not the prevailing system. How can there be change in the status quo when the status quo is determined? I mean, you yourself are part of an inherited power setting. How can that change when it doesn't really have to?
It has to be changed. If you want more prosperity for our countries, it has to be changed. If you want to have more secure for ourselves and our children, it has to be changed. The more process or the more democracy for any country in the Middle East it's strengthening the country, strengthening the rules of the country, strengthening the ruler of the country. It does not weaken him. No, I believe that the democracy in the region will strengthen the tide between the countries and strengthening the prosperity and the peace in each country in the Middle East.
Now, I understand that you were attacked in Paris just this past October. Do you believe that was a warning from your uncle and his regime?
I don't believe that we went to this kind of message that we can do, but I'm available 24 hours, 65 days in a year in Kuwait, and I don't believe that denouncing violence and promoting peaceful matters will put me in a position to have this in Kuwait. But as I mentioned before, I was in Paris, and I mentioned when I was in Kuwait, there's no evidence of who was behind this, but I hope that the more process or the more support for peaceful process will stop any future means of forcing or meaning not to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, unlike Libya, just coming back to the region for a minute, U.S. allies Bahrain and Yemen have received no serious sanctions or penalties for their use of force against protesters. Is this going to establish a new norm in the region? Do you think that the lack of U.S. response, for example, has encouraged Syria to bring in security forces to seal off the city of Deraa, for example, and they've opened fire on demonstrators in Damascus because they don't think the U.S. or allies are going to really do anything?
Melody, I denounce violence anywhere in the world. When I said before, and still say, and I will still say in future, peaceful process is the best way to protect each country in the Middle East. I need, and the people of the region need, a clear message from all the democratic countries around the world, and U.S. is included in this, to push for non-violent process of change, to more people expression of their rights and their future in the region. Stopping or the silent years, the last silent years in the region made people think otherwise. But I think, I believe that if there is no support, peaceful support from other countries, the people will change themselves.
And you personally would like to see change? What is your peaceful vision? What do you think? What do you want to see different in the region?
I like to see change. I like to see equality in the region. I like to see poverty to be zero. I like to see the environment or the countries to be higher in all means of life. I like to feel as a family member, as head of a family, that I want to see my children and my grandchildren living in a very clean environment in future.
Okay. Well, that's all that I know we have time for. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should be sure to include in my article, Sheikh?
No, but it's very clear for me to always come back to the same thing what I mentioned before, that freedom and the right of deciding your future life is very important for the region, and it's very important for the people in this region, for them to have a very clean, very stable countries. They have to change or forced to change in future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for your interview.
We have speed.
Good morning. Welcome back. Joining us now is Sheikh Fahd of Kuwait. Sheikh, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much to have me.
Now, you're in New York and talking to us via satellite. You are there, I understand, to open the doors to the Fahd Center for Culture and Dialogue Among Civilizations. What is the center's purpose and goals, and how will you evaluate its success?
I'm very happy to be in the U.S., especially in New York. And concerning the center, main object or main reason for my visit to U.S. is to open the main office of the center in New York City. And the objection or the object of the center is, first of all, is to denounce violence. Second thing is dialogue between civilization and dialogue as a general. And the third thing is to promote and defend the freedom rights and freedom of speech and freedom of control your life in future.
Now this, if I'm not mistaken, this is not the first action that you have taken to promote the notion of change in the Middle East. You also have a newspaper and a TV channel, isn't that right?
Yes, this TV and the newspaper channel was the beginning of introducing and supporting liberation or liberties in the region, especially in Kuwait. And the center is the result of many years of participation and supporting and defending the most important thing in the world now, as we see around us, is liberation and defending the rights of people.
Sheikh, how would you describe yourself? Rebel, revolutionary? What does your family think of these activities? Because after all, your uncle is in fact the Emir of Kuwait. Does he support what you're doing?
I don't think myself as liberated, or I think of myself as ordinary citizen, thinks and believe that freedom and liberation and freedom is the most important things now in the world. And I think and believe that the change will be the change is now the world is changing, especially in the Middle East, and I preferred the change to be change in a peaceful way than violent.
Are you or your center offering any particular support to any of the reform movements around the Middle East right now?
So this is support that we support everyone who wants to make the change in a peaceful manner. Any movement wants to change in a way concerning any means of violence, we don't support and we reject it.
So if I believe you are actually offering active support in Libya, for example. Is that true?
In Libya, we support the human needs, the people needs in Libya. And what's happening in Libya is tragic. And we prefer to have this process as in a peacefully change without any violence.
Now, let's look at Kuwait itself a little bit, because Kuwait has a very high literacy rate and a strong commitment to education. Do you think that helps build greater pressure for greater democracy that the emir will have to acknowledge eventually?
Kuwait is a sample of democracy in the region. Kuwait has already introduced its own constitution since about 50 years ago, and this constitution gives the people and their representative in the parliament the right to block all government decision concerning daily. And most important thing in this condition, that the parliament can reject and not to approve the government if they want.
What do you personally have anything to gain by your campaign? Do you have any internal political aspirations?
My concern is what's happening around the Middle East. And my most concern is Kuwait. Kuwait is a very democratic country in the region. Kuwait has played a part of introducing the democracy in the other countries in the region. And I think we have a lot of things to move ahead, to have Kuwait as a pioneer in democracy and freedom, not only in the region, but in the whole Arabic world.
Sheikh, why are you meeting with banks and other funding sources while you're in New York?
You know that politics and economic is one part in the world now. And whenever you want to support an idea concerning more freedom or more rights of speech, you always find that supporting communities like banks and investment institutes is a positive side of the campaign.
How will unrest impact oil prices? What will different regimes around the Middle East do to protect oil production and those revenues?
I believe that if the process of change is done in a peacefully procedures and in a fast and peaceable procedures, I think the oil industry in the Gulf, especially in the Gulf, will be stable, and it will not be infected, or it will not infect any race in future.
And last question for you, as a would-be free, unfettered media mogul in your country, I understand you're having a hard time keeping employees because they face political pressures for working for an uncensored station or newspaper. How can you function if you can't keep your talent? And I understand you also have been unable to attract advertising so far.
Really, we're fighting, and I think that the more you fight, the more you gain concerning our obligation in front of our people, concerning more freedom, and that peaceful peaceful changing in our country, in Kuwait. But at the end, anything you do, it's for your country, and you bear anything you bear the result for more freedom.
One last question for you, sir, and we don't have too much time. You've described some of the ideological changes that you're working for in Kuwait. Would you also advocate for things like increased financial transparency in the ruling family?
Really, in Kuwait as a ruling family, as I mentioned before, that as a Kuwait and introducing the constitution, is the royal family is a part of Kuwait, and we've been living in this area of democracy for 50 years. And I think there's a lot of people from royal families, either in Kuwait or in other countries, want to transform to be peacefully. And as I mentioned before, that it's happening, so I like it to be peaceful, and everyone likes it too.
I lied, sir. One last question. You were attacked on the streets of Paris just a few months ago. Do you believe that was an assassination attempt at the urging of your uncle, the Emir?
The investigation is still on, and there is no proof of who's behind it. And I prefer to wait till the end of the investigation, but any or all effort to have more freedom, you will find somebody fighting for it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.